Welcome back to the video series on the Kowa spoke cutter. Today we're covering another area of major maintenance, and this would be the cutting function or feature with the sliding block and sliding disc cutter head on it. First, let's get this thing out of here. 14mm Bach wrench to loosen that nut right there, and then bring this considerably out until I can get this removed. Here we have the plunger. Just pull that pin out and the plunger is removed. Here we want to be gentle, careful. We don't want to scratch this thing, so we're going to very lightly grab it. A set of pliers, very lightly, just enough to get a grip on it, and pull the sliding disc cutter body out. And there it is. Now I'm going to move to the table. The sliding disc cutter body looks like that. So you have a rectangular block with a recessed front on it that accepts a sliding disc cutter held in place by an Allen screw. And here it is up close. That's what it looks like. It's got a little plate on the back where the plunger pushes on it. And there's the sharp edge of the disc, and there's the bottom side of it that's rounded off and sitting in a recessed portion of the block. The head Allen screw, the sliding disc cutter right here, uses a 2mm Allen. It's adjustable. This sliding disc cutter here can be rotated, and that's how you get a long life out of it. It technically, or roughly, has 8 possible positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And depending on how much you use each position, that will roughly determine the lifetime of your sliding disc cutter. If you were to use 8 positions on here at 40,000 cycles each, that's 320,000 total cycles potential. If we're able to use each position 50,000 cycles each, multiplied by 8, that's 400,000 total cycles. Maybe even more. The point behind this is that this cutter is going to last a very, very long time if you take care of it and if you make occasional adjustments when needed. On the fill with spoke cutter, the expectancy for the fill with spoke cutter body is the life of the machine itself. On the Kowa spoke cutter, 320,000 cycles, 400,000 cycles, 500,000 cycles, who knows? This is going to last a very, very long time if you take care of it. Chances are pretty good that if you take care of this and do not damage it, and maintain it, and adjust it once in a while, when you retire your Kowa spoke cutter, when I retire my spoke cutter, it will probably still have the original block and sliding disc cutter in it. I expect this to be in its original condition, still in my machine, when I retire it at 200,000 cycles or 300,000 cycles. That's how long I expect this to last. Now, there are several things you need to pay close attention to when operating your cutter. You do not want grit or grime inside the cavity or on this body. Doing so will damage the cavity and will damage this body. The cavity that's been machined out in the cutter body itself on the Kowa spoke cutter is very tight, very highly precise machine work. This too has been very precisely machined. The tolerance between this and the cavity is super tight. Just a hair loose enough to allow this to move back and forward but just tight enough that there's no slack or wiggling or deviation. It's very, very tight. So it's very important, number one, you keep this lubricated. I use Tri-Flow synthetic lube. I keep this coated in some of that. Tri-Flow synthetic lightweight oil. I'll keep it coated. Anytime you feel grit or grime, you need to get in there and clean it out and clean this off. You do not want grit or grime in there. If you feel like chips are in there or small pieces of spoke in there and they're not falling down the can, they're staying in the cavity, you need to stop right away, disassemble everything, take this out, clean out the inside, blow it out, wipe it out, and make sure you clean this off as well. This is critical. Even worse, this is something you really need to pay attention to when you're operating your cutter. If it feels like at any time you're forcing this past a burr or something really rough, you need to stop immediately. Remove this body, get this out, inspect the inside, clean it out. Examine this for any burring or chips or whatever. And if necessary, you may have to oil this and then using very fine steel wool or very, very high grit number wet sanding paper, do some very fine sanding, cleaning of the surfaces, especially on the corners. Very early on when I used this machine, I made a mistake. A very small piece of spoke not only got in there, but somehow wrapped itself around this corner right here, creating a chip that flared a little bit, scraping the inside of my body. I had to pull this out. I had to very lightly, with a fine file off the chip in the corner, and then take very high grit wet sanding paper and oil and smooth everything off a teeny bit. I saved this from permanent damage, from becoming non-usable or non-functional. And that's my fault, not Kowa's fault. I made a mistake. Keep the cavity clear of all debris, large and small. Keep this clean of all debris. Fine, medium, coarse, doesn't matter. Keep it clear of it. Keep this oiled. Maintain this. Adjust this disc when needed. And your cutter will last probably for the life of your Kowa spoke cutter. This will still be in there when you retire your machine. I can't emphasize that anymore. Now I'm going to show you how to put this back inside the machine. Back to the machine we go. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a nice good cutting of oil. So a Tri-Flow synthetic lightweight oil. So this body's nice and slippery. And with the head up, I'm going to very gently put it right back in. It's a very tight cavity. You can feel it a little rough, but it still goes in and out smoothly. I'm going to put the puncher back in using its knob. So 2 bolts are down, this little tiny adjusting bolt end is pointing up, and you're not doing it this way, you're doing it this way. You want this facing upwards, or pointing upwards. In between. And a little oil on this pivot pin doesn't hurt. See that? Okay. Now for the handle, there's a hole right there, right behind this plunger when it's in the upward position. And that long pivot pin goes inside that hole. So I'm pushing the plunger a little bit forward and get that all the way in. I'm taking this 14mm locking nut and I'm backing up a little bit and I'm turning this all the way in. So the end of this just hits the pin that went inside. And I'm going to back it off about maybe 1/8 of a turn, or about 1/8 of a turn. And then bring that locking nut all the way forward. And while holding this wheel, doesn't have to be super tight, just cinch it up so this can't come loose. And then test. This should move freely without any scraping or grinding. Should be nice and smooth. And that's how you put the cutter body back in. I'm going to say it one more time. In my opinion, this is the most critical operation of the machine right here. You need to take care of that. If this does not feel smooth, you feel grime or grit or chips, or especially any feeling like you're gouging something or pushing against something that's scraping, stop ASAP, disassemble, inspect, clean, repair if necessary, lubricate, put back in. You take care of that cutter and it will probably last beyond the retirement time of this machine. Again, in my estimation, that cutter is good for 320, 400,000, maybe even 500,000 cycles. Lifetime use. And that concludes this video segment. And I'll see you again soon.